Okay, Mr. Chair, the meeting is live and recording, and we have all members in attendance.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, and good morning, everyone. It's Tuesday morning, March 22nd, 2022. It's 9:31 a.m. This is the Mental Health and Addictions Task Force. I'll call the meeting to order, and we'll get right to item number 2. Is there any declaration of interest? Seeing none, if one should arise during the meeting, you can declare at that time. Item number 3, we have a presentation on Mental Health and Addictions Task Force Work Plan. We have a motion there. Could I have a mover and a seconder for that motion, please? Moved by Councillor Burley, seconded by Councillor Mackey. And with that, I'll introduce Madam CAO Kim Wingrove. Good morning, Kim. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair O'Leary, and good morning, everyone. At our first meeting, we touched briefly on the work plan and promised to bring back a final version for your approval today. I want to say thank you to everyone for your suggestions and contacts. I think we've been able to put together a very comprehensive list of stakeholders. There's clearly significant interest in a broad stakeholder base for us to draw insights from. Each one of the stakeholders or presenters that's noted on the work plan was contacted by the clerk's office and asked to provide a 15 to 20 minute presentation on their organization's mandate, programs, funding model, governance considerations, information about who their clients are, the number of people that they serve, and whether or not they have a wait list and the status of that wait list. And finally, any service gaps and any suggestions that anyone might have to address those gaps or improve the services going forward. So that's where we are. Clerks have done their best to group presentations around a topic or a theme. We've added a couple of meetings from what we had originally envisioned. One to accommodate some of the additional presenters that were brought to our attention, and another meeting just to bring back the draft final report to be able to confirm our findings. So all of this will still leave us in a great position to be able to come forward with a final report in September. And it was, I think, really important that we were able to wrap up this work in that time frame. So with the work plan that was attached to the agenda today, so we have some really important information to hear from our primary mental health and addiction stakeholders this morning. At our next meeting in April, we'll hear from another group of really important people who are, I think, doing a lot of the heavy lifting to support those who are struggling with mental health and addictions, and how that plays out in poverty and homelessness. On May the 17th, we'll hear from the justice sector, as well as some more detailed information about the really exciting work that's happening with the supportive outreach service. In June, we'll hear the Indigenous perspective and some more from our homelessness partners. And then finally in July, the education sector's there with the school board representatives. And then in August, as I mentioned, we'll summarize the themes, proposed actions, and next steps, and get that confirmed by all the people around the table. So if there's anything that you feel that has been missed, or anybody has any questions, happy to answer those. But that's the work plan as we understand it today. Thanks.
Thank you, Kim. Any questions for the CAO? Councillor Mackey, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. Kim, thanks very much for the work plan, very in-depth, and it looks like we've touched on most of the issues. Just wondering about, when I was reading through, I believe it was the, whose presentation? I think it was maybe the hospital's presentation. They talked about the 3,500 people that require geriatric mental health services. I'm wondering, is there any tie-in between our long-term care facilities throughout Grey and Bruce and and mental health? And should we get the perspective from our long-term care facilities? Just a question I had for you. Thanks.
Well, it's certainly a really interesting question, given that at the present time, we're piloting that behavioral support transition unit at Grey Gables. So that site was meant to be, I think, and I'll let Naomi speak more to this when it's her part of the presentation. But I think right now, other than being at the hospital, there wasn't a lot of alternatives for those folks. And so that's the part of the reason why the province supported the creation of the BSTU and those 16 beds, I believe it is, at Grey Gables. So I think certainly we can get an update, even if I got a written one from Jen in a month or two, when that pilot's a little further along, we'd have a sense of how that's looking. I believe we have funding there till 23, but I think longer term, I think we need a plan really that all of us can understand. So great point, and I'll make a note of that. Thank you.
You okay with that, Scott? Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Kim before we move on?
Allison Govier, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Allison, go ahead.
Thank you. The work plan looks very comprehensive. I'm really happy to see the addition of the physicians and nurse practitioners from the hospital and the family health teams. That's really good to see. Another addition that I might want to just add is that we do have access to the peer advisory committee, and Sandra McClay Winters is here today to represent the committee, and that this is a committee of 12 people with lived experience of addiction who live in Grey and Bruce counties. So at least half of them live in Grey County, and they've been meeting with agencies over the last year. So they met with 9 different agencies in the community and have had a chance to kind of like pull some insights across those meetings and they also have their own lived experience working within the system. So I just want to flag that as a resource to this committee. And perhaps maybe later in the process, if there are specific questions or ideas that you want to run past the group, counselors are more than welcome to join a peer advisory committee meeting, like to come and speak to them, or Sandra is here to be that liaison between the committee and the task force. So we could potentially come to you. Just wanted to flag that. Sandra, do you have anything to add to that?
I think you covered that nicely, Allison. Thank you.
Okay, Kim, you've taken note of that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for Kim? Mr. Warden, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kim, I recall at the beginning of this, we heard from Michael Martin, who is a former Crown attorney for both Grey and Bruce, and he expressed interest. So I wonder if there's some way to tie him in the justice sector. I don't know. I know time is short and we have a lot of people, but I do know that he has a lot to contribute, years and years of experience in both Grey and Bruce. I don't know if he would want to be a part of that, or if he wants to maybe put something in writing, or what.
Yeah, if I can, Heather, is that not how Brenda Lawson came to us?
I think that is the roundabout way for that, yes.
I think that we did reach out to him, and then that's how the connection was made to Ms. Lawson. But I will double check that, but that's what I recall.
Yes, and Mr. Chairman, if I might, following up on Allison's comments, when we were creating this group, we very much wanted to hear from people with lived experience. Does it call, Kim, for us to perhaps do something special, something independent of everything else, to hear the voice of people with lived experience? I know that we have a lot on our plate already, but I just feel that that piece is so important to the work that we're doing here that we should make sure that that voice is heard in a meaningful way, whatever that means.
Well, certainly having Sandra here and having Allison here, we hoped that they would be able to contribute their insights and comments to all of the different topics as they come forward. But I think that my initial thought is that after we've heard the presentations that are here, maybe it would be most appropriate then to get a more formal reflection from the peer advisory group on all of the information, so that kind of letting them have the last word, if you will.
It's a good thought.
Is that
Thank you.
okay? Does that
Yeah.
seem reasonable, Sandra, that you could kind of make overarching comments at the end?
Certainly, I would do that.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Okay, that'd be great.
Certainly a tough balance. I know we made the decision not to have public members. I mean, there's so much that we could add to this, but it's, with the tight schedule, it's, I think it's been well put together. Any other questions for Kim before I call the question? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Against? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, item number 4, Executive Director Phil Dodd from Keystone Child, Youth and Family Services is up next. And before we give the floor to him, Phil, I just want to congratulate you on your latest announcement that you'll be retiring after 31 years on July 1st. So we're certainly happy for you. Just as happy that you're still here today for this important presentation. So welcome. You have the floor.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chair, and welcome to everybody. And thank you for the retirement. I figured when my inbox got full, it was the right time to go. So it is more than over full at this point. So I was going to ask on Tara, I believe, to help with the PowerPoint presentation. I did not. I'm hoping that everyone can hear me okay. I'm having a few technology issues on my end here this morning. Just a quick thumbs up if you can hear me okay, folks. Good. So I did not want to just do a repeat of my presentation back in January with folks. So I tried to put together a little quicker synopsis of Keystone and the issues that we deal with on a regular basis and the gaps and opportunities that we have here. So I'll try to quickly go through this as not to bore people from the council who've already gone through my presentation. So if you want to go to the next one, Tara, please. So maybe back a bit. I think it slipped forward there on us somehow. There it is. So just about Keystone, we are the Children's Mental Health lead agency for Grey and Bruce County. We offer a wide range of support and counseling services and prevention well-being programs throughout Grey and Bruce. And we have a live-in treatment program attached to our work that we do and are involved with youth justice, access mechanism for complex special needs, children and youth, and a wide range of services for young people 0 to 17. And when I say 0 to 17, we do work with the infant population in mental health. And I think that's an important piece to always keep in mind, as I know Grey County does a lot of work in that population. Next slide, please. So in terms of the gaps in the child and youth mental health community-based sector, historically, we have been chronically underfunded over multiple years of multiple different ministries that have overseen the children's sector. We are now in the Ministry of Health, and things seem to be a little more hopeful in some regards with that most recent shift. But we have always been in the lower end of the funding from government of the province, who funds the majority of our services that we operate. So there is a lack of available resource within our existing program funding to do the full continuum of intensive service treatment needs that we would like to be able to provide. We have limited access to tertiary acute care beds in the west region of Ontario, of which we are a member, and having an opportunity for a young person to go to London Health Sciences, which is our catchment area in London, is very limited when we have those highest needs children and youth that we're dealing with. And then there's a lack of the full continuum of service for the 6 to 12-year-olds. We identify that as a gap area within our organization. We dedicate a lot of our resources to the adolescent population in crisis and their severity of issues. And we have great partnerships in the birth to 6 population with Grey County and other organizations and health unit and so forth. But it's that age 6 to 12 population that we have flagged as a group that we want to try to dedicate more funding to as time goes on. And then just the ongoing complications when dealing with families and the limited resources that we have to address some of those unique needs for the intensive services we provide in a family environment. So those are sometimes a challenge for us as well. Next slide, Tara. Again, looking at the increased demand for service prior to COVID-19, we were keeping up, barely keeping up with the demands of our community. I would suggest some of you who heard me in January, I spoke of the snake that ate a couple of rats. I know that might be a sad story for you to hear again, and I won't repeat it, but the full continuum to meet the needs of all of the young people and children and families in Grey, it's just not there to the depth and the breadth that we would like to see. So it is with the advent of COVID and what are seemingly more and more families coming into our service with generational trauma. And this is a trend we're seeing, and I'm not sure about my colleagues in the adult sector, but this is a trend we're seeing here at Keystone, and the complexity of those situations is quite intensive work that we become involved in. Next slide. So always a challenge, and we continue to build and work towards our capacity of better serving our Indigenous populations, both on and off reserve in Grey and Bruce County. And then I would say this next item is the ever present challenge that we face at this time of year as we look at doing our budgets for the next fiscal year, 22-23. Do we try to divert money into infrastructure, or do we continue to invest in our frontline staff to meet the needs of the demands coming in the front door? And that's an ever present dilemma that we find ourselves in every single year out. And I have, in my 11 years here at Keystone, always chosen to go to the front door to put our resources that we have to more staffing, which subsequently creates a dilemma in our back end of our organization with infrastructure and administration. So it's been a challenge to find that nice balance. And I don't think we've found it here fully at Keystone, and we'll continue to work towards that. And I'm sure the person that takes over after me will have that challenge, and probably will curse me a little bit because I did put the money in the front end to frontline staff as opposed to infrastructure and such. So next slide. And again, this is a challenge of the cycle of the more complex mental health in dealing with the demands of the service. And this is something we grapple with on a regular basis with the numbers that come into our organization on a regular basis, around 1,600 a year we project that that's going to be significantly higher in this year moving forward with the situations we have seen at our front door right now. But that cycle of when you have a finite resource, and we know it's best practice to get families in the front door as quickly as possible to get to a person, and balancing that with, again, that finite number of personnel to do the work, and the complexity of the cases that we're finding, and our need to be involved on a more long-term basis with some of these complex situations, it's a real challenge to continue to get people in the front door quickly. I would say to you that we do not have, quote unquote, a wait list coming into Keystone. We have what I would refer to as a wait time. So when a family connects with our intake department, they are given an appointment to come in. That wait time from their call to their first appointment is starting to grow within our organization. And I can share with you today that it is encroaching on the 2-month range, that people, if they call today, the wait time to get to their first appointment is about 2 months. They are given their appointment time, they know who they're coming to see, but it's a 2-month timeline for them to get in the front door. And again, just the additional work that we find ourselves in with the more complex scenarios that we're seeing as an evidence-based, family-focused organization, working with multiple members of a family. Children are not in isolation, and their parents, their teachers, their multiple other community service providers that could be involved. And we work with all of those people to try to put a good service around a young person to address and deal with their treatment needs. Next slide, please. So a few opportunities and some good opportunities. If you want to go on to the next one, Tara. So just being here today is an amazing opportunity from my lens and what I see in Grey and Bruce County. Being all levels of government working together to try to find solutions and shining a light on the dilemmas that we face in the mental health and addictions world in Grey and Bruce is amazing to me. And I appreciate the dedication of Grey County Council to look at this and put this task force together. It just makes a lot of sense to me, and I think it can only, more information is better than the vacuum that is sometimes out there. So I appreciate this effort and putting a bit of a shine of a light on the issues that we're struggling with in Grey, Bruce. So again, from my earlier presentation in January, early intervention is key. Being able to get involved as early as possible and look at changing the trajectory of these young people and their families and move them into a better space is always the key. And again, partnering with organizations like Grey County and with the health unit and the great services that are out there early on in school boards as well. These are only going to continue to aid in less work down the road if we can get into the game earlier and more effectively. Next one. And the opportunity I see here in this process is looking to build our intensive treatment continuum and dealing with those more difficult and hard to serve and high risk and vulnerable adolescent population that we do have within Grey and Bruce. And this also builds in earlier identified the population age range of 6 to 12. I think this fits in there nicely as we build our intensive treatment continuum. It's just a key piece to how we're able to move that stuff forward. And then accessibility is, and this is probably one of our bigger issues that we need to grapple with in the very short term, is the accessibility to our live-in treatment program. The picture on the top is our current live-in treatment facility. As you can see, there's stairs going up there, and we need to be able to, by 2026, I believe, is the deadline to have full accessibility in the province of Ontario. So this is not an ongoing solution. We will need to look at other ways to have our live-in treatment program shifted over in our ideal world to our current main office site here across from Kelson Beach, where we do have space and availability to see that happen if we're able to make that happen. So accessibility is a key piece in what we're looking to do, which also provides proximity. If we do shift our live-in treatment here, it provides proximity to our counseling staff and more opportunity for treatment interventions on a daily, consistent basis. And the opportunities to work in partnership. So working with our Indigenous communities, both on and off reserve, and identifying that group of people that we can better serve and work in a more positive manner with. We're very fortunate at Keystone to have representation from both Indigenous communities in our community on our board of directors, and they have formed a working group within our organization. It's called the Mcfarland Working Group. The Mcfarland stands for Good Life, Live a Good Life. And the Mcfarland Working Group has been instrumental in Keystone moving our trajectory forward with our cultural sensitivity and identity knowledge for our staff, and primarily for our live-in treatment youth who historically our program was called The Residents. And I think each and every one of you would recognize that terminology is not friendly terminology to our Indigenous populations. So that's something we have shifted to live-in treatment as opposed to residential. And we'll continue to work with the Mcfarland Working Group in helping us to move forward in a positive way. And that it's been one of the shining lights of my career here at Keystone to be a part of that process. Excuse me, and then partnering with all of our child, youth, and family serving organizations across the spectrum in the school sector, the health sector, child welfare, youth justice, addictions across the board. And then finally, looking at partnering with our adult providers and continue to partner with our adult mental health and addiction providers, and moving that seamless transition of our most complex young people into the adult sector. And there is a shift in how that looks for a family, and recognizing that and being able to give a heads up in the various changes that will transpire as they move into the adult system, I think is very helpful for them. So continuing in that good work of partnering. And that's I believe that is the end of my presentation. And again, more in-depth information is available on our website in any of the services that we offer. And if people wanted to go there and browse around for a while, they're welcome to do that.
Great, thank you, Phil. Boy, there's a lot there. I just had a question. The youth treatment is obviously underserved. You talked a lot about underfunding. I'm just wondering, just in terms of priority, if you did have the funding, what are we missing? What specifically would you do if you had the funding? Or is it just widespread?
I think it's across all elements of the organization. Yeah, again, as I said, I made the choice over my tenure here at Keystone to put the money in the front line to support our frontline staff and try to build more staffing complement for our organization, as opposed to putting the money into furniture or whatever infrastructure type issues. And that's the dilemma we find ourselves in with our live-in treatment program right now. We should have been looking at this probably 10 years ago when I first started. But I would say I would still put the investment into staff. If I had ongoing dollars, I would put the investment into staff to continue to shorten wait times, to be able to build out the intensive treatment options that we're able to provide for the young people and their families. That is where the demand is. That is where the need is. That is why we exist, is meeting the needs of the children, youth, and families in Grey and Bruce County. So that's where I would put investment. Again, the person taking over beyond me, that will be their decision to steer that direction. So, but I think we have a pretty strong board of directors who feel that is the need in Grey and Bruce, and putting investment into the frontline staff is a priority.
Okay, and Phil, the house that's on, I believe that's 4th Avenue East in Owen Sound, with the way the real estate prices are, if you sold that building, how would the funding be in terms of switching over and going into your own building? Is that another major shortfall, or have you even looked at that yet?
Yeah, I think if the opportunity, it's a timing thing, and it's a bit of a business thing, I suppose. But if we were to sell that existing home, that money would go into the renovations to the new site.
Right.
But I need that home until the new site is built. So nobody gives you the money up front for a house and says you just live there for another year while you renovate your other house. That doesn't, I'm not aware that happens. If it does, please let me know, and I might look at investing in a new house. If there are any builders out there, Dwight, I don't know if there's any options around that. But yeah, that's the plan. Eventually, that money would go towards the renovation of the new site.
But would it, so you would need bridge financing, so to speak, but would there be enough in the sale of that home to do the renovations, or would it create another funding issue?
It would create another funding issue, Mr. Chair, and I think we would, there is a fundraising component to what we need to do to renovate the new site. There is, I believe the Ministry of Health is beginning to open up their capital opportunities again for applications. So that would certainly be something we would be wanting to pursue, looking at the Ministry of Health supporting through a capital program. So we would be looking at multiple different funding opportunities to move forward there. There's some private sector investors out there as well that have been so very generous to Keystone over the years that we could have some opportunities there as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Phil? Kim, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Phil, just for our records, I just wanted to confirm the ministries that support you, or where the sources of funds that you rely on year over year come from where? Health, just?
So I believe that is on our website, and I don't have the list of 11 off the top of my head, Kim, but our core funding comes from the Ministry of Health. We also are involved with MCCSS.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's my wife calling me. I apologize. Just hung up on her twice, and she's going to be so upset with me. Usually when I hang up on her once, she doesn't call back. So Ministry of Health Core, MCCSS, Ministry of Children, Community, Social Services. We have a high funding envelope with them as well, with complex special needs and special needs strategy in Grey and Bruce. Grey County, for sure. And then the Federal Health Canada programs through the Public Health Agency of Canada. And that's more of our prevention, birth to 6 continuum of services. And then we have some private funding pieces as well. other little pieces with blind, low vision, hearing envelopes as well. But I do believe, Kim, there is a list on our website of
I'll look there.
all of our funders.
Okay, thanks so much.
Councillor Mackey, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And congratulations, Phil, on your pending retirement. I hope the fishing is good for you. Phil, just to follow up on what Chair O'Leary was talking about in regards to your live-in treatment program, do you have a budget in mind of what the renovations would be, and where are your fundraising activities now, and what might a request be for bridge funding, or the county does put money into bricks and mortars for our hospitals, and would there be an ask from Keystone of County Council for any funding?
Yeah, I think I can't give you an actual dollar amount. I think that we're from the early predictions that we had when we first looked at that with the contractor, it was in the 1.2 million range to put that program together. With being a children's residential program, there has to be a sprinkler system in there and all the various components that go along with that, which kind of raised the bar a little bit in terms of expense. So the current home would not sell for that amount of money, I'm quite certain. But yeah, we're in terms of our fundraising efforts, we do have very modest fundraising right now. We are looking to put together a campaign in the very near future to push that the live-in treatment program forward. And again, I think we'll be dependent on government, with the provincial government. If they open up the capital opportunity with the Ministry of Health, we would be looking to make application there as well. So we're not really far down the road yet on that.
Follow up, Scott?
I'm just wondering, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, Phil, would you be willing, if the committee was interested, to see your current site and what you have planned for the future?
Absolutely. I do have plans put together, and the site is available here. And if anyone wanted to come over and take a look and walk through, or see the existing home and what that looks like, we would have to time that where our young people are not in the home in order for visitors to come. But I could facilitate a tour of both sites if someone was interested to come.
Thank you.
Actually, that's a great idea, Scott. I just wonder about maybe a Thursday morning or Thursday afternoon, maybe after a county council meeting, so that other councillors could get a peek too if we had the opportunity. Any other questions for Phil?
Councillor Compass.
Councillor Compass, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, all of our members here. Congratulations to you on your retirement. I'm sure you're looking forward to it with this sunshine approaching us and springtime approaching us now. I just have a question about your live-in program, and I'm wondering the number of children that you would accommodate in that program, the length of stay, and the age range that you would have in that program.
Okay, so it's a co-ed facility. We're licensed by the ministry for 7 beds occupancy. Typically now during COVID, we are reduced to 4-bed occupancy based on the number of bedrooms that we have available. And this is another issue in terms of the older structure of that house that we currently have. In the new site, there's a plan for 8 bedrooms to be in there, individual, but we can't share bedrooms right now based on COVID. So, our current occupancy is maximum capacity is 4. The age range for coming into the program is 12 to 18. And we try to look at that very closely when we have that wider range of age within the program. The typical length of stay is between 3 and 6 weeks. It's a short-term stabilization, crisis assessment, and treatment facility, primarily dealing with higher risk young people and the issues that they present with.
Thank you.
Okay, Warden Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Phil, I think what you're hearing is a lot of interest from county council members anyways, in this particular part of your presentation, which is that treatment program. And so I had a bunch of questions, but suffice it to say, I'll hold on those questions for now. If we're gonna have an opportunity to come and visit and talk more, I think you're hearing that members of county council are really interested in hearing how we can push this agenda forward and what role we can play in moving that along for you.
Great, thank you. I'd be happy to answer 100 questions if you're able to come down and take a tour. That'd be great.
Okay, any other questions for Phil on today's meeting? No, we'll move on here. Our next presentation is from Naomi Vodden, Grey Bruce Health Services. Good morning, Naomi, you're on the floor. Thanks.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for inviting me today. So Grey Bruce Health Services, if we go to slide 2, I'll let you put it up, Tara, if that's all right. I know you sent me an email and I responded just barely, so I could make, okay, that's probably better than me trying to control it. So we can go to the next slide. I have to say Phil's PowerPoint was so lovely. I think he has a job when he retires if he wants, because mine is very, very basic here. So if we go to slide 2, I can just let you know that Grey Bruce Health Services, Tara, could you move it to slide 2? Is it not moving forward? Oh, sorry. You have to go right back to.
Well, isn't that cute?
Yeah, that's not mine. So that was the one from the next one. So I have to move back to the earlier presentation.
Tara, I'm gonna stop sharing your screen for you and see if that will help you restart it again.
Sorry, I lose all my controls when I share, and then I can't do anything. My apologies, just let me bring that up again.
Oh, that's okay. I could probably try hitting share screen.
I think if I unplugged my second screen.
Do you want me to try, Tara?
Sure, if you could, that would be great.
Sure. Okay. Let's see where we are. If that works.
Yeah, that's
There.
good.
Does that work? Okay.
Yes.
I did it. Wonderful. All right. So just to start off and let you know that we are a Schedule 1, which means that we are the only hospital in Grey Bruce that is under mental health law able to keep someone in involuntary status. So this is fairly an important distinction. So when a patient comes to a rural site, they can be held until we're able to assess, but the language is forthwith. So if they're at Mcfarland Hospital, let's say, we do need to provide them an assessment and then bring them here to our hospital. So we do have the mental health law that we function under, which has some very strict parameters, which I think are very challenging for families to and the community to completely appreciate. So just to give you just a brief overview, our being the Schedule 1 facility nowadays is probably a lot different than when I started 30 years ago, where we would see all sorts of voluntary patients on our unit as well. We have not seen a voluntary patient probably for the last 5-10 years for sure. So our patients are very ill. They come in either under a threat to harm to themselves or other. And really the stay is quite short. And the goal being that we want to hook up to community services as soon as possible. We know that the mental health inpatient unit is not probably exactly how it's on TV with lots of treatment. It's really, we try our best to do a lot of groups, but we have very, very ill people. And so it's really about a stabilization and then discharge to community resources where things can be really personalized. And so we do have quite a few outpatient programs, which I'll go to the next slide for, but we also partner with, of course, CMHA, Keystone for the older teens, as well as Participation Lodge, Community Livings, Y Housing, where it's really important that we partner with all of our providers. So just on this, you can see this next slide, type of services offered. Is that looking okay, coming through?
Yes, it is.
Okay, perfect. So it's a bit of a clumsy slide, but I'm going to try to go through some of our the highlights. So we do provide mental health support on non-mental health units as well. So in particular, we see that if a patient has come in with a significant suicide attempt, they might be in ICU, they might be on a medicine unit. So we do have staff that will attend to those units. And as well, we have inpatient beds. So I've got here that we have 2 peds beds, that they're not true peds beds. And later on, I talk about that being a gap, but I can just mention that here too. We really just kind of carved out 2 beds out on our women and child unit. And we've done that because it was just really important that pediatric clients that are patients that are really at risk of harm to themselves or others are held in the hospital. In previous times, they were held in Emerge. And then the ministry would say that we are to transfer to London. And that is, as Phil already noted, very, very challenging to get our patients to London. And even when we do get them to London, there is that's such a hardship on our families. Our families need to drive that way. They need to stay in London while their child is there. And of course, if they have other children at home. So that's a significant gap. The live-in treatment is such a wonderful resource for our hospital. And that would be the treatment phase. So really these 2 beds would be that acute phase when someone, again, is really at risk of harm to themselves or other. Then they would stay on those beds. And then as soon as they would be stabilized, we would hope to put them into the live-in treatment or to outpatient programming. And as Phil noted, there's still that gap in age because the live-in treatment is a little targeted to a little bit older. So we are starting to see children quite a bit younger with significant issues. And yeah, so that's our inpatient beds. I've got the geriatric and the acute beds kind of divided up because that's how we've divided them up. But in terms of funding, it is one big unit. And that's problematic for what already Ms. Wingrove pointed out is the geriatric patients that have a dementia. The long-term care homes are having challenges dealing with some of the high acuity of the behaviors. And so they aren't able to be held safely in the long-term cares. And then they come to our geriatric inpatient unit, which means then that we have very long length of stays because we do not have the supports in the community to manage these very complex patients. So when you think about the fact that we have 45 inpatient beds, we actually have 16 almost less because they're held for geriatric patients that we would hope could be in long-term care. So really, again, when the BSTU is, we're really, really looking forward to that. And I would argue we would probably need a lot more BSTU style beds as we move forward. I just want to give any opportunity, and I can't really see anything if that really addressed the comments around the BSTU and geriatric beds.
Naomi, where are these beds? Is all the beds in Owen Sound?
They are, yeah, being the Schedule 1, they can only be in Owen Sound. So in order to have beds in another hospital, we would have to apply for Schedule 1 designation. So all the beds are on the 4th floor. The adult beds are on the 4th floor, and we've divided up the adult beds into 2 units. So one is the geriatric beds, and then the other are the 22 acute mental health beds.
I just look at that as a huge problem. If you know, you've got someone in, I don't know, Lion's Head or Southampton that's about to harm themselves, and I mean that becomes an issue in itself, just getting them here. That has to be a problem.
For sure, and they are very, you know, if we look at Lion's Head, as you said, if we look at Durham, these are very little hospitals with very few staff, especially late at night, and it is a concern. And we're grateful, as Clark will, I'm sure, speak about the urgent response team. They attend to those emerges, and then the patient is transferred here as soon as possible. Again, the flow is very good. I will say on our acute beds, our length of stay is very appropriate. It's very good. Our stay on those geriatric beds is way too long, which again, when you think of those beds as being acute beds, if we could open up those beds to be more shorter stay as well, we could very quickly transfer a patient from Lion's Head or Durham to our unit. But it is a problem when, as I said, we have 16 beds on the geriatric unit. We have patients there 5 years, 2 years, they're not being accessed as acute beds. They're really more like long-term care type beds.
Yeah, I can't see my screen, so if there's any other questions, just jump in. Otherwise, you know, we just carry on.
Okay.
Just one point around those geriatric beds. I think that problem is only going to intensify as we have people aging in place in our residential programs as well. So the pressure on those beds and the pressure to have supports for people who are aging, who are currently living with a serious mental illness is growing. That wave is on us now.
It is, and yeah, for sure. And the other thing is, I would say that a lot of those patients we've seen almost with an acquired brain injury from the years of the early antipsychotics that were used. And so their capacities are quite a bit diminished than I think this next generation will be. And we definitely need to work with long-term care in a way to support these patients, or else we'll have more than 16 beds filled with these kind of the patients, which then really limits our access for a younger acute illness. Okay, so I'll continue on. We have 3 nurse practitioners that provide addiction inpatients and outpatient support. We have a 9-bed withdrawal management. It's actually a 21-bed, but we're funded for 9, and so frequently it's certainly much fuller than 9. We have a partnership with our CMHA to provide family and peer support here at the hospital. And as Kim also mentioned, we have the geriatric volumes that are on the next slide are really around our Behavioral Supports Ontario mobile geriatric team. And we do go into long-term care. We go into people's homes. Our goal is to keep people from deteriorating enough that they need to come into hospital. But of course, the nature of dementias, there is, certainly an ongoing deterioration that happens. But they do serve all of Grey Bruce. I'm jumping a little bit here just around funding. So the BSO team is part of base hospital. We have a combination of funding. So we have base hospital funding that is part of our inpatient beds. And we also have funding from our community. So the former LIN, Ontario Health, we have funding for community-based program. So One gap that I'll speak to later is certainly around geriatric mental health care. The BSO very specifically works with behaviorals around dementias. And so as I've gotten more beds, I've tried to provide more support to our community programs. So we have one geriatric mental health aftercare worker. So these, again, we have the BSO team that does the dementias, but we have no real team that addresses geriatric needs. So we have one staff in that area. We also have a prevention and early intervention program that is actually funded out of London, LHSC, but we only have one position. So I've been augmenting that. So we have now 3 from our inpatient budget, just to really support really what Phil is saying. We really do need to catch our young people early. We need to make sure they have a wraparound care, that their families are supported when we first start to see the signs of psychosis. So it's a very underfunded program. And as I said, it's funded for one. We've got 3 positions in place right now, and I would argue that we would need a bigger team. We have an assertive community treatment team where it works 7 days a week, 365 days a year, but they only work in the Owen Sound area and just about 30 kilometers are out. So they do med deliveries so that we can do an early discharge, but then we deliver meds every day, 2 times a day, 3 times a day to the bulk of the people on the ACT team. And then as soon as we can get them stabilized, we transition them to our case management or CMHA case management teams. But limited in that we can only serve, it's not that big of a team. I think it's 8 members, and then you're covering 365 days a year. So you really can't serve med delivery outside of this area. We have counseling services. We have follow-up from our inpatient unit. We do 7-day follow-up. We also manage the community treatment orders. So if a patient has over 3 presentations to the inpatient unit in a year, or over a 30-day presentation in our inpatient unit, we can, with the support of the substitute decision maker, mandate care, and we do that with a community treatment order. We also have a few patients that are not criminally responsible that we follow. So they have been discharged from forensic programs in St. Thomas or Waypoint in Penetanguishene, and so we provide that close monitoring through the ACT team as well. We have a crisis team here at the hospital, and we partner with CMHA, and we provide pediatric support from the rural sites as well from our crisis team for age 7 to 13. We have a program that's just offside our ED, and to your point, Chair O'Leary, this program is provided. It is designed to provide support for the rural sites as well, but when it was initially built, it doesn't have any lockable rooms. So we have been transferring patients that are lower acuity to this ED program, but we are starting renovations to incorporate even a larger area that will have 4 rooms, and those rooms will be self-contained lockable rooms with a washroom if we need it, which will be designed to transfer patients from a rural site straight to our ED in this crisis support program. So we hope that addresses some of the needs of the rural sites as well. We have a dual diagnosis program, and again, it is a very underfunded program. It's 2 staff, and it's I'll speak to that a bit under the gaps. We have case management services that work on the CMHA teams or on our GBHS teams throughout Grey Bruce. We operate the North Bruce team in Wyerton. We have a fairly large psychiatry team, including 2 child and adolescent psychiatrists. That was a lot of work to recruit. I think it was 30 years we were trying, so we feel very grateful for that. We have a very small psychology department that can support the psychiatrists if there's some uncertainty around a person's diagnosis. We have a sexual assault and partner abuse care center, so we do trauma counseling for all patients that have been sexually assaulted. we also do the sexual assault nurse examiner for the emerge department. So anyone who has been sexually assaulted comes into the Owen-Sound emerge. Our nurses are on call and attend to the emerge. They do all the forensic evidence. They take the photos and give that package to the police services. We have a community addiction treatment program. So it's a 3-week treatment program that works out of the withdrawal management services. We have rapid access addiction medicine clinics that operate throughout Grey Bruce, and we're still expanding. And we attend to Saugeen First Nations and Neheshiniming on a daily basis. And we have substance use counselors on the inpatient unit and the outpatient unit, or outpatient programs. So the next slide just highlights some of the volumes, and it's really just so that you can have a sense of the volumes. There is a lot of work going on, and I know with Phil's programs and CMHA, there is, I think it just speaks to how much volume there is and how much need, because as you're aware, there's also a huge unmet need as well. So we have, I'm not going to go through our programs, but I will note that on our SAPAC, so our sexual assault nurse examiner that I just talked about, the sexual assaults in the past year have tripled. And so that is with no increase in funding. It's bringing in those nurses in 3 times that they were before. So I'm going to flip to the gaps, because I just want to spend a little more time just talking about the gaps. So I see the gaps around access. I think one time one of my mentors said to me that he always thought of mental health as, and I'm not going to put it as eloquently as he did, but that you can throw a snowball and you cause an avalanche. And so I think that is so important when we think of drop-in clinics. I think if we can get services to somebody really fast, even if it's one session, that snowball allows them to access more community-based resources. It allows them to connect to places like Safe and Sound and Y Housing and United Way, and it really stops a crisis from happening. So I think of the need for the drop-in clinics, and I put some of my own notes on here that weren't on the original presentation, but I think that as time has gone on from when I started my career, there was more dollars for prevention, and now there's very targeted funding, which doesn't allow for a lot of prevention. So I really, when I think about what can Grey Bruce County do, is to have room for drop-in clinics. If people know where they can go for help and they can just drop in there, they're more likely to get help quickly, and it won't escalate to the point that they need that inpatient bed. The SOS clinic that started with Kevin McNabb has been wonderful, and I would love to see that continue. I think it's really helping people right where they need the help at the time they need the help, and I think we can even do more for that. I also target that the RAM physicians. We have this wonderful group of RAM physicians, but it's based on OHIP billing, and that's not how addiction works. It's not how mental health works. People, so you know, if you think of primary care clinic and you've got booking, and that's how the billing works. RAM patients might take longer. They may not show. You may have a clinic where no one shows. You may have a clinic where 10 people show. And so it's not fair, I don't think, to the physicians to not have a stipend. And we are very blessed with physicians that are committed to the RAM work and are doing it anyways. But I think we could even have more if we could have some kind of sessional fee, stipend fee for the RAM physicians. And then if I talk about housing, certainly when we think of housing, I'm sure Clark is going to speak more to that, so I'm not going to talk about it too much, except to say that our dual diagnosis population is also really struggling with housing. We have patients that are living on the unit, again, 2-3 years, waiting for housing that's appropriate to their high needs. And I think we could look at partnerships with community living, with Grey Bruce County, with CMHA, with Participation Lodge, some type of a partnership so that these patients also get high quality care. And I would also talk to the OSI clinics, operational stress injury clinics. Mayor Klumpus and I have been working in the last few years, and Kevin McNabb, around supports to our first responders. And there is certainly no funding available right now for those programs. And I think I have really addressed the other factors, the other gaps. So I'm open to questions or needs for clarification.
Okay, Naomi, I have a couple. Can you just talk about bed shortages and how that ties in with the Bayview project, and maybe speak about how the Bayview project is coming along?
Sure, we did receive some additional funding, and we posted, and we are hiring some staff. We remain hopeful that the Bayview project will be funded. I do not believe it will be funded at near the rate we had hoped, and we keep hearing a date is coming, and we have not got that date yet. So I'm really, I hear glimmers that it's still up and for consideration. So we've been seeing every week a new program open. So we saw one in Thunder Bay, we saw Timmins, we saw North Bay, we saw Sudbury. So I'm hoping any one of these weeks will be us. And I think even though these are not acute beds, again, I think if we can stop people from needing an acute bed, we'll be okay. If we can get people out back into housing, into the community, that will take a certain percentage. If we can open up long-term care beds that work for our dementia patients, that opens acute beds. The Bayview project has transitional living units, so that would open up some of the patients that are sitting on the inpatient unit, or people that are maybe concurrently disordered and are really struggling. And again, if we can get them wraparound support quickly, they may not need a bed. So that's our hope with Bayview.
Okay, and second question, you talked about working in collaboration with CMHA, and I'm sure Clark will talk about this or his staff moving along here. But from your perspective, talk about that relationship, and is there any gaps? Is there anything that could be done differently?
I think we're working through our gaps. Certainly, certainly when the teams were there, there was probably a little more clear process. And then as the teams fell apart with the integration, we've had to rebuild our relationship and rebuild our forms, rebuild our processes. And I think it's going quite well. We've been meeting regularly. And so I don't know that there is anything else, Clark, that you might add. I think we're working out where he starts, where I start, where I continue, and back that flow back and forth.
Yeah, we are rebuilding in a way, because we were formed through an amalgamation. So we are in the process, and have been in the process of integrating, because the way our amalgamation happened was that three organizations were put under one roof. So we had three payrolls, three policy books, and we have been pulling those together over the past few years, and during COVID, et cetera. So we are making progress, and there's always a push-pull with hospital and community. I mean, we both rely on each other. When people become very, very ill in the community, they need to go into hospital and have that stabilization period. And then when ready for discharge, community needs to be able to pick them up quickly and support them. So it's a continual. There's a real need for close communication and integration, and we're working on that. And one of the bigger projects that's going to take a bit of time is a central access that we hope will cover the full adult system. So we have to do that internally as part of our integration, but we're working with GBHS to coordinate that for the whole adult system for Grey Bruce.
Great, thanks for that, Clark. Any other questions for Naomi? Councillor Mackey?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And thanks very much, Naomi. My question is around the geriatric beds. It's a shame, you know, when I think I heard you say, or it was Clark, that some residents stay at the hospital for 2 to 5 years.
That's
To
correct.
me, that's just dreadful. And I'm just wondering, does the Ministry of Health recognize that dilemma? And, you know, I've thought for a long time, you know, being involved with our long-term care facilities, that, you know, our long-term care facilities are becoming like hospitals. So is there recognition that, you know, to try and maybe move some of the funding around so that the patients can be placed where they would receive the best services possible that would also look after their needs? Do you know if that's happening at a high level?
Certainly, we've brought it forward quite a bit. And when we look at other areas, so just to be clear, our funding is considered acute mental health. Even though we're doing these 16 beds, which are more chronic, we are funded for acute. So some areas actually have declined these patients, and they've ended up on other type beds and in other hospitals, not in mental health beds. And so part of it is, I guess, our issue is we find we can get better quality care on our geriatric unit. So if a patient is who has dementia is on a medicine unit, there is no not the same social rec opportunities, not the same training around behavioral techniques to dealing with someone with dementia. So we have created a bit of our own problem, and so we've now trying to work with that, you know, trying to keep some patients out of our unit and only the most challenging behavioral ones. But I think the hospitals that have done well are the big city hospitals, and they'll have a geriatric unit. So it's not a mental health unit, it's a geriatric unit. And I would like to think that's where we go at some point, that we have a geriatric unit, and then our acute beds become our acute beds, which we need in order to keep flow going in our region, and to not like, sometimes I do feel like we just have to discharge people a little bit early because we have the volume coming in the door. Probably every day we have 10 to 12 people waiting at an emerge somewhere in Grey Bruce for a bed. So it's quite a flow. So I don't know if I answered that directly, but I do think our geriatric population is better served not on a medicine unit. They're better served in a good long-term care unit or on a geriatric unit of some type.
Follow up, Scott?
Thanks very much. No, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, just a comment, just in terms of that geriatric resource, it does seem to fall between our current service capacities and configurations. So, you know, it's not really appropriate for it to have them sitting in acute care beds, but they're also too intensive to just put them out in the current configuration of community services. We need to have more of a 24/7 support for them in the community, but we do need to inject that resource into the community. So it is there does need to be a bit of a resource injection in there.
Thanks, Clark. Anyone else? Seeing none. Okay, before we move on to the next speaker, let's take a quick 10-minute break. We'll come back at 10:55. And I just ask that you turn your video off, and we'll see you in 10 minutes. Thanks. Clerk, if you could just give me the word when we're ready to proceed.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. We'll just give it another couple of minutes. We are missing a few still.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Mackey has left the meeting, or he will be leaving at 11:15, sorry.
At 11:30? Okay,
11:15.
11:15. Okay, Mr. Chair, you're good to go.
Okay, thanks, Madam Clerk. Okay, next speaker. First of all, thanks very much, Naomi, for your presentation. That was great. Next speaker is Executive Director of the Canadian Mental Health Association, Clark Mcfarland. Clark, you can go ahead and start here, and if you have other staff that want to speak, I'll just leave that up to you as you go along, and we'll take questions at the end.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so I do have a number of staff. I'd like to introduce Scott McKay, Director of Client Services, is with me today, and Stephanie Burley is our Manager of Addiction Services, also with me today, and Felicia Hunter, who is currently our harm reduction outreach worker working on the SOS team, but her permanent position is addiction intake worker. So they will be helping me with the presentation and fielding questions. So yeah, welcome. Maybe you could have the next slide. So we thought we would just take you through a quick history of the organization, and then an overview of our programs and services, a quick orientation to the recovery approach, which is our main approach to service, and then getting into some of the harm reduction approach as well. So if I could have the next slide. The Canadian Mental Health Association Grey Bruce Mental Health and Addiction Services was formed in 2018 through an amalgamation, you may be aware, of the legacy CMHA Grey Bruce branch, Hope Grey Bruce, which was also a community mental health and addiction organization, and G&B House, which is a 15-bed recovery home for men who live with substance use disorder. The main driver of that integration really was to improve access to service for adult community mental health and addiction services. And also there were some concerns, I think, around some of the governance of the some improvements in the governance and oversight of the services as well. Also, the team structure that Naomi had indicated existed was also a very leading model in its day, but it was, when it was reviewed, the feedback came back that it was a good model, but it would be better if there was sort of if it was one organization. So it also a driver to it was seen as amalgamation of the organizations would be of benefit. So I think it was a great story of leadership and foresight that the organizations came together and committed to that integration, and the CMHA Grey Bruce Mental Health and Addiction Services was created. So we have been, as I had mentioned, in the process of bringing those three organizations together. We were put under one corporate roof, but still had administratively three organizations. So we now have one payroll, one policy book, one phone system, and we are starting to work on revising and our service delivery model. So moving to a central intake, moving toward a shared caseload approach, which is a little further down the road, and reviewing our assessment tools, processes, procedures, as well as our aftercare. We are community-based, and so in juxtaposition to the hospital, which is Sched 1, which is facility-based, we provide service in the community where people live. I always like to emphasize that really, as community-based services or organization, we not only focus on providing high-quality services, we want to transform the community. There's an old saying in CMHA that a caring community is the answer. If we can break down that stigma that surrounds mental health and addiction and make it safe for people to reach out for help and to reach out to help, we'd be in a much better place. So we really do want to transform the attitudes and approach and understanding of mental health and addiction. So, and I think that's reflected in our mission, vision, values. But let's get on with an overview of our services, and I'll hand it off to Scott, who will walk us through mental health and addiction housing, our housing service. Scott, you might be muted there.
Yeah, thank you, Clark. So I'm going to start by going over our mental health and addictions housing. First, we have our apartment program. These are affordable units scattered throughout Grey Bruce. 6 of the units are located in Owen Sound in a CMHA-owned building, Riverview Apartments. The remaining 93, as I mentioned, are scattered throughout Grey Bruce. And these are units where CMHA holds the lease with the property owners, and then we have an occupancy agreement for individuals living within those units. And I think it's important to note that each individual within our apartment program is attached to an outreach worker that can ensure that the person has access to services, primary care, psychiatry as needed, and support individuals with goals towards recovery. Next up, we have residential programs. So these are, once again, CMHA-owned sites with lots of support available on site, including assistance with medication, meals, social rec on site at these programs. So we have Frank Street, which is located in Wyerton, and it has 10 beds. And then we have Brook Street in Owen Sound that has 8 beds. And finally, when it comes to housing, we have Community Homes for Opportunity, also known as CHO. These are privately operated boarding home style housing units. And CMHA is responsible for providing outreach support to the individuals living within those homes and providing oversight to ensure that the homes are maintaining a certain level of quality of service for the individuals they're housing. This includes, monitoring their dietary program, making sure that the facilities are safe and that maintenance is up to date, as well as in the past 2 years, we played a huge role in supporting these homes with IPAC and outbreak support. So I'm going to hand it over now to Stephanie to talk about some of our addictions programs and services.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So in terms of our addiction services, we have 6 different addiction counseling programs available to the community. All of the programs provide counseling for both individuals concerned about their own or someone else's substance use or gambling. So something that I think a lot of people don't realize is that we don't just support people who are impacted by their own substance use. We really are here to support what we identify as affected others. So those individuals who have loved ones, peers, family members, whatever, who are impacted by substance use or gambling, we can provide them with support as well. So we have, like I said, the 6 different counseling programs that I'll get into in a second. The New Directions programs are our programming for adults. So that's for individuals who are 18 and over. And then we have the Choices programs which serve youth, typically up to about age 20. Primarily, they support high school age students. So those counselors actually go into the local high schools. We have an arrangement with both the Catholic and Blue Water school boards where the counselors provide outreach right within the schools. But we also know that not all youth are attending school, so we can support individuals who aren't affiliated with a school as well. Wait times for all of our programs really vary depending on the acuity of the situation, the specific program that they're being referred to, and just really the client need and counselor availability. So we assess that on a case-by-case basis. I would say right now our longest wait times are looking at 2 to 3 months for services. That's on the long end of things, but then there are, again, some programs that can be accessed quicker. Counseling can be provided through a range of services. So the pandemic has allowed us to kind of expand our reach in some ways. We're now able to provide counseling through telephone, over Zoom or MS Teams, or in person. We found that that's been a great way to actually reach, I would say, a larger population of people, particularly in the world of addictions, where getting to appointments has been really challenging. We historically had a pretty high no-show rate. Now that we can meet people where they're at in a more kind of fulsome way, we're seeing that no-show rate really go down. So we also have within CMHA, G&B House, as we've already mentioned. So G&B House is a 15-bed residential supportive treatment house serving men. It's an Ontario-wide program, so people come in from all over the province to attend this program. Their stay is usually from like 3 to 6 months. It's a wonderful program. For those who don't know where it is, it's located up next to Withdrawal Management Services, kind of by the Grey County building. So actually right beside the Grey County building, so you probably do know where it is. And it's a place that individuals or clients typically kind of gravitate towards when they've tried a lot of other programs. So it's more for individuals who are experiencing like chronic addiction issues, and they're looking for something where they can really immerse themselves for a good chunk of time. Okay, I think I talked about new directions, choices. We also have the Concurrent Disorders Treatment Program. So we have 3 counselors that work in this program, and they provide services for individuals who have both a serious mental illness as well as a co-occurring substance use disorder. So these clients are typically highly complex and their needs are pretty high. So the counselors in that program tend to keep a smaller caseload so that they can meet the needs of those individuals more readily. And then we have a problem gambling program. So the problem gambling counselor provides support for, again, individuals who are impacted by their own or somebody else's problem gambling behavior. This is a position that's funded in part by OLG, and we have an arrangement with OLG, and especially at the Hanover Casino, we provide outreach services. Typically, we haven't been because of the pandemic, but we'll be starting up again, where we actually visit the casino to provide information, and we can support individuals with self-exclusion so that they can get on those self-exclusion lists. And then we have addiction court support. So if individuals who are charged with offenses under the Controlled Drug and Substances Act, if they're referred through the Crown Attorney or others within the justice system, we can connect them with a counselor who can help them possibly complete a diversion program.
I'll just jump in there just with one comment. We do have a range of approaches within the addiction services as well. So G&B House takes an abstinence-based approach, whereas we also follow a harm reduction approach, which Felicia will give us an orientation to as well. So there are different methodologies, different approaches to providing service for addiction.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So I'm going to jump back in and provide a high-level overview of our mental health programs and services. So starting with the mental health crisis line. So crisis support via telephone is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year by calling the crisis number. Folks who call have access to telephone support to help manage the crisis situation and de-escalate the situation. Mental health court support, similar to the addictions court support. Case management is available for persons with serious mental illness who come into conflict with the law. And we support individuals 16 years of age and, or older. And similarly to addictions, we support around court diversion, case management, court support, and consultation. Our intensive case management service is located on the shoreline, so sort of the Concurrent, Southampton, Port Elgin area. And it's an interdisciplinary team comprised of CMHA and Grey Bruce Health Services staff. And they are providing intensive case management to individuals with complex needs based on their mental illness. Our MHEART team provides mobile crisis support throughout Grey and Bruce counties. MHEART can be activated via the police services, ED departments, as well as EMS. And they provide crisis management, de-escalation with a goal of diversion from ED. So outreach support, I already mentioned that outreach workers provide support to individuals within our housing. We also have 2 workers that are dedicated to the Grey County by names list. So individuals who are homeless waiting for housing. We have 2 outreach workers that provide support in connecting to resources to prepare them for the transition into housing and to work on goals towards recovery. One worker has expertise in mental health, and the other one is has more of a background in addictions. Peer supports, we run a number of peer support programs involving people with lived experience with mental illness and or addictions that intentionally share parts of their lived experience to support individuals in their recovery. We have workers that are based out of GBHS Owen Sound that can provide on-site support, peer support as needed. We have programs that support families of individuals living with mental illness, various group programs. It's a really robust team within the peer support programs that provide a variety of services. Mental health counseling. So we have a mental health counseling program that provides brief individual and group counseling to individuals 16 years and older with acute mental health needs. There are a variety of modalities available within the team, and they are based out of several sites, mostly Markdale, Hanover, and Southampton. So other mental health and addiction services, we have our group services that offers a variety of social and recreational and educational opportunities. Our social, recreation, and leisure, so programs and services that are aimed at improving quality of life and community integration. This program includes our Fresh Fruits catering and cafe, as well as our food, forest, and garden programs that offer opportunities for people with lived experience to gain employment and work under the guidance of CMHA staff. Social Rec and Leisure also provides employment and ID services. We have our Youth Awareness and Education program. So this includes the Fan Club, which is a children's mental health awareness program that provides education to individuals using child-sized puppets. We also have Let's Talk, which is for intermediate and high school and college students. And then through our Youth Awareness and Education program, we have the capacity to deliver education sessions such as mental health first aid, applied suicide intervention training, and Safe Talk. We have the support outreach services, which is a partnership. It's with EMS. Naomi had mentioned earlier that Kevin McNabb has done a lot of work around moving this program forward, this pilot forward. And so it's a partnership with CMHA Grey Bruce, Grey EMS, GVHS, and United Way. We're going to talk a little bit more about this program later on, so I won't dive any further into it now. And then we have the harm reduction and needle exchange program. So we're providing harm reduction education and counseling and distributing safe use supplies and naloxone kits out of several of our office locations. I'm going to hand this over to Clark to talk about some of our sponsored programs.
Yeah, so we have some programs that aren't part of our core program offering, and that really they come in under our governance and management, but are not part of our mental health and addiction services. So one is the community drug and alcohol strategy. So Allison sits with us, and she is technically an employee of CMHA, but we simply steward that program for the partnership. And Allison works with a steering committee, which provides her direction on her work, whereas Stephanie provides her that day-to-day sort of oversight as a manager. So we steward that program. We don't. It's not one of our programs. The same is true for the men's program. So that consists of the PAR program, Partner Assault Response, and my dad's group, my mom's group. They are that was a program that was looking for a home about 6 years ago, and the CMHA gave it a home. So again, it comes in under our governance and management, but is not a formal mental health or addiction service that we offer. Back to you, Scott. I guess I could do these as well if you want.
Yeah, sure.
Sure. So in terms of clients served, we provide there's about 10,000 and clients face-to-face visits. You see there about 16, and non-face-to-face about 23,000. In terms of gaps and challenges, certainly we've heard a lot about the increasing acuity across the board, both in mental health and addiction, and which has been and that's not simply a function of COVID. That was the case prior to COVID. You know, the staff in our housing program will say, 10 years ago, it was a very different situation in housing. And in terms of both availability and the types of clients we are serving. Very intense now. Behaviors are much more challenging to deal with and complex. Access to service, I think, is sort of an endemic challenge in rural and areas where it is hard to provide access to, in a sparsely populated area with resources spread out. And hence the need for more mobile models of care. We do have certainly wait lists, and that is, and I think, to be fair, there's certainly a resource issue, but we can always and should always be looking at how we can configure our resources more effectively to meet the needs, and that's the conversation we do have an ongoing basis. The housing issue, I think, is probably top of the list. It is fundamental to some of these recovery to have shelter, have a home, and it is becoming increasingly hard in this market to find affordable housing, and then just the supply is not there as well. And along with that housing go supports. So we need to be able to provide people with the supports in order to move it from simply shelter to a home. And our hours of operation certainly is a challenge. Right now, hospital and police are the 24/7 options. And, with the exception of our MHeart service. So, as a system in the longer term, I think we do need to start thinking about providing 24/7 service in the community if we are going to shift things significantly in the system. And then specialized service for sex trafficking and intergenerational trauma grief. That's certainly something we're seeing much more of and becoming a greater need. So. Back to you, Scott.
Okay, so we recognize that not everybody on the task force has experience working in community mental health and addictions. So we wanted to take the opportunity just to provide a high-level overview of some of the approaches that we use. And we use these approaches to create a strong therapeutic relationship with the individuals we serve and support, use these approaches and principles to support individuals to make changes towards living in recovery. So just the recovery approach principles, I'm not going to go through them all, but basically, as a ground rule, we treat everyone we serve with dignity and respect. We always want to convey a sense of hope that things can get better, that improved quality of life is achievable. We recognize and that people need to be accountable for their recovery, so we encourage people to take that responsibility on. We acknowledge that recovery is non-linear. There's no formula to get somebody from point A to point B. That each person requires a unique approach towards their recovery, and that sometimes people can fall back a few steps, and that's okay. We just continue to support them to regain any momentum that has occurred. We operate from a point of acknowledging an individual's strengths. This is especially important, I think, at the beginning of service to leverage those strengths and build a little bit of momentum and confidence and hope that recovery can be achieved. And then the work that we do is holistic. It's looking at the entire person, not just the symptoms of mental illness and medications that are available to treat those symptoms. We look at everything, including the social determinants of health. So trying to make sure that they have adequate access to good food, that we're promoting good sleep, that they have primary care, and that their health needs are being addressed. So that's just a high-level overview of the recovery approach in mental health. So I'm going to hand it over to Felicia to just go over some principles of harm reduction. Once again, just for those who may not be very familiar with these principles.
Okay, thanks, Scott. So harm reduction incorporates a wide range of strategies that include safer use, managed use, abstinence, meeting people who use substances where they're at, and addressing conditions of use along with the use itself. Because harm reduction demands that interventions and policies designed to serve people who use drugs reflect specific individual and community needs, and there is no universal definition or formula for implementing harm reduction. So it accepts that we cannot simply eradicate the use of licit and illicit drugs. As such, harm reduction is focused on minimize harmful effects rather than criminalizing or condemning individuals using drugs. Successful interventions and policies should focus on quality of life and well-being, both for individuals and communities, rather than eradicating drug use. This sees drug use as a health issue requiring evidence-based treatment and harm reduction services. Strategies aimed at eradication of drugs often push people away from the resources they may need due to creating a culture of fear and mistrust. It's important that we ensure that individuals who use drugs and those who have used drugs in the past are involved in the development of policies and programs aimed at addressing their needs. Recently, we heard from a gentleman about the challenges of getting to a therapeutic dose of methadone, which was his goal due to barriers he faced being able to access his daily drink. If someone misses their daily dose, they are required to start back at the beginning. Their starting dose, and then they have to work their way up again. And it takes intervals to get back up to a therapeutic dose. And he had a number of realistic solutions that would make him maintain his daily dose schedule possible. Drug use is often a very complex, usually involving a number of biopsychosocial factors across a person's lifespan. It is important that we recognize this complexity as we support an individual in their recovery. Change often cannot happen overnight. It is important that we focus on making use as safe as possible for individuals who are using. It is important that we recognize an individual's autonomy in decision-making around their drug use. We cannot force someone into abstinence, and it is better to be non-judgmental and person-centered in our support of individuals so as to create a strong therapeutic relationship that is supportive of reducing attendant harm. Empower people who use drugs as being responsible for safer drug use, as they are the ones who will actually be following harm reduction strategies. It is important to note that harm reduction does not attempt to minimize or ignore the harm and danger associated with illicit drug use. On the contrary, it keeps harm at the forefront on its efforts to promote interventions and policies that minimize harm to the greatest extent possible. I think you're next up.
Yeah, thanks, Felicia. So one of the ways that we've been trying to, bolster our harm reduction approach at CMHA was through our needle exchange program. So over the last year, we've really been expanding this. We partnered with public health and became a needle exchange site. We now have the harm reduction supplies and naloxone kits available at, I think, 7 different CMHA Grey Bruce sites, which is really exciting. And we've been working towards expanding capacity across all of our staff members. So we've been providing training across all the different program areas so that everyone is on the same page and can talk to individuals about these different kits. So the slide there shows the different supplies that are available to individuals if they come in. It's an anonymous program, so people can come in and get what they need in any quantity that they need. They can also drop off used supplies. The idea here is really to reduce stigma and then reduce harms associated with lack of access to clean and safe supplies, right? If somebody is using drugs intravenously, best practice is for them to use a new syringe every single time they inject. Some people may be injecting 10 or more times a day. So that's quite a bit of syringes that they need to be using in order to reduce the harm to their body, as well as reduce the possible spread of infection and disease. So being able to provide those to people allows them to be safer in their use. So this chart just shows a little bit about the volume of safe use kits that we've distributed since we partnered with public health. So we really started tracking what we were doing in September. As you can see, the volume of kits that we are distributing has gone up exponentially since then. So we did just initially start by providing the safer use kits out of our addictions office here in Owen Sound. Then we expanded down to our 1024 location. And then from there, we've expanded across Grey Bruce. So you can see that there's been a huge uptake. I'm not sure if I have a slide on here, but We also exponentially increased how many naloxone kits have been distributed throughout the community. I don't think the slide is here, but there, I believe during 2020, yeah, I think for the entire year of 2020, we distributed around 100 naloxone kits throughout the community. In just 4 months in 2021, we distributed more than 100 kits. So our rate of distribution has gone up immensely. And there's different things at play there. We're getting them into more people's hands. More people are using them. We know that the supply of illicit drugs locally is much more toxic than it was prior to the pandemic. And so individuals are requiring to use multiple doses on a more common occurrence. Just going to quickly touch on the SOS program. I know that there'll be a presentation about this coming up in future weeks. So just a quick kind of snapshot about what this looks like. And this is really just speaking to the mobile SOS. There are 2 different SOS programs kind of at play right now that are a partnership between a ton of different community agencies. The mobile one is really working with Grey County paramedics, Grey Bruce Health Services, CMHA, and the United Way. So this image really just demonstrates how those 4 agencies are working together to create this mobile team to really go to people, meet them where they're at the right place, the right time, providing the service that they're looking for, and really approaching them through this harm reduction and recovery lens. So not going in with this idea that the individuals have to make changes in their life, but providing options and providing people autonomy, building that trust with social services and healthcare, because oftentimes the individuals that they're encountering are folks who have been underserved by our agencies historically, have been maybe mistreated, or there's distrust there, or they've had no access to services. So there's fear involved, and there's a lot of trust that needs to be built. So it's slow work, but it's been incredibly impactful work. You can jump to the next slide there, Scott. So this just quickly shows some of the preliminary data from the mobile unit, which started on February 1st. We just found out that we can continue with this project until the end of April, but from February 1st to March 10th, they have encountered over 300 unique clients. So that's quite exciting throughout Grey County. So the primary spaces they've been visiting people are Owen Sound and Hanover, but they have been also popping into Wyerton, actually. I think Chatsworth, Stone Tree, different places like that. I'm going to hand it over to Felicia and invite her to, so Felicia is our harm reduction counselor that's been working with this team and traveling around, and just invite her to share a story or 2 about the impacts that she's seen with the mobile unit so far.
Yeah, thanks, Steph. So I have a couple stories that I think really reflect how the SOS team is working collaboratively and the impact that it's having so far. So just under 3 weeks ago, I received a referral from Safe and Sound for a woman who would like some counseling. When I met her, she decided to disclose that she was actively being sex trafficked and would like some help. And so this was the first time that this woman had told her story. From there, we supported her through navigating the system and connecting with appropriate supports. The biggest being that we had a case conference where we allowed her to take the lead on her care and express what she would like her life to look like and how we could all play a part in that. And at the end of the session, it was she was given an apartment through Great County for special priority that she will be moving into, I believe, April 1st. And this is her first apartment that she has ever had on her own. And we've connected her with supports at her speed. So she's not at a space yet to access counseling, but we're getting there. So we're putting some of the pieces together, and she's not having to do any of this alone. We've created a safe space where she is open now about her substance use and is now making goals to decrease her use. Whereas 3 weeks ago, she was very closed off, very hard to judge whether she was using substances or not. And now we've created this non-judgmental environment where she calls openly. She's making decisions on her own. She has confidence, she has light, she is smiling again. And it is really beautiful to watch her kind of create this new life for herself. And SOS has been a part of that, as well as Grey County, GBHS. We've all kind of worked collaboratively to assist this client with getting her life back, essentially. The other success story that I have, back in the summer, we were doing the COVID relief at the Forum, which is where this all kind of started in Hanover. And there was a woman there who was expecting, and she was also being sex trafficked. And with the help of all of the agencies, GBHS in Grey County, CMHA, we were able to get her out of that situation and bring her to Owen Sound. She is well supported in the community with outreach services, psychiatry. She was given access to prenatal care, obstetrics, all of those things. She is now, she's had her baby, and she is caring for her baby on her own. And she is being given an apartment through the by names list, which for her is also her first apartment. And it's really exciting to watch. She also was addicted to substances in the summer, and she has now been abstinent for almost a year by her choice. And she's looking for a job and all of those things, which is really exciting as well. So I think these two examples show how we are working collaboratively, and with the first example, very quickly. That isn't always the case. Sometimes things take a wee bit longer than 3 weeks to pull these supports together, but for her case, she was special priority. So it was amazing to see all of the agencies come together and really, really help this lady get her life back. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Felicia. I think that demonstrates recovery and harm reduction principles in practice. So much appreciated. And that's a wrap for us. We're going to turn it over for questions. Thank you for your time. I know we shared quite a bit of information in a short period of time, but we do appreciate it.
Great, thanks very much, everyone. Clark, I just wanted, the one thing out of this that really jumped out at me is, and you didn't really go into detail, but you talked about wait lists, lack of resources. My first thought is, from someone that doesn't really understand how things go, there should not be a waiting list in my mind. I just don't get that. Waiting lists and mental health, how does that ever come together? But how big are the waiting list? And maybe talk about that. What does lack of resources mean? Is that a lack of funding, lack of staff? What is that?
Well, I think our funding hasn't really kept up with costs. So we've had in the past, again, I have to get this, I think in the past 15 or more years, we've had a 2% increase. So we are behind by about 18% in terms of costs. So I think I had mentioned last time, and if we were at full capacity, fully staffed, and our staff were at the 5th step of our pay grid, we would be in deficit. We would not be able to afford to operate. So we are forced to vacancy manage in order to maintain. So right off the bat, we can't operate necessarily at full capacity for an extended period of time without having turnover. I think responsibly we do have to consider how we can do things differently. So, are we doing the best we can with the resources we have? And, we've been investing internally in developing a quality improvement department so that we can dig down and have better quality data and utilize that data to inform decisions and try to refine our approach in that way. I think we can probably find some efficiencies in that way, but we will ultimately need more resources, because some of those problems that on a system level, just like the geriatric beds, need an infusion of resources to solve them. So it is, it's a problem that's endemic to healthcare. Healthcare takes up more than 50 cents on the tax dollar, and so it is everybody has that need and demand. So it's hard to stretch them.
So how many people would be on a waiting list? And give me an example of the type of person, the type of problem that they're waiting.
Well, it'll vary by program. So we have a wait list for housing that I haven't looked at recently, but that was approaching 200, and that is and there are, we also provide people with that choice, so we can offer an apartment or a place, but they don't necessarily have to accept it. So those people would be in need of housing. They'd be precariously housed or homeless, and living with a mental health and or addiction issue. For those on the addiction wait list, they would either be someone living with a substance use issue of varying severity, or they may be an affected other. On the mental health side, again, they'd be people who would be in need of counseling, have experienced trauma of some sort, be grappling with some endemic issue. So, and some people on the wait list, if it is a situational need, by the time we get to offering service, it has passed, and they no longer, they decline the service as well. But I don't know, Stephanie is closer to that, could speak to the nature of wait list people on wait list.
So Stephanie, just before you go, like, can that not go the other way as well? Like, by the time you get to the person, it's passed and they no longer want your help, or something really bad has happened and you're too late.
It can. One thing, I'll just jump in. One thing we are doing is looking at more of a stepped care approach. So you can think of a number of concentric circles, and that first layer is walk-in service. So anybody can access. So you walk in, you either get information or referral, or it might be a peer that you speak to just in the moment. And it is an easily accessible resource. The next level may be making an appointment with a counselor for have brief therapy. And as you go in, it becomes more and more a scarcer and scarcer resource, but the hurdle to get to that resource becomes a little more robust. So there's a little more assessment, there's a little more weeding through and selection of who gets to access that resource. But in the initial phase, you can just walk in and get that. So with our peer support service, we are trying to, in the process of pivoting that, creating what we're calling a recovery college, which is using that education metaphor. So people aren't necessarily clients who are dependent, they are students who are learning and achieving. and they are acquiring knowledge to compensate for deficits in their life. And the peers will be, instead of sort of having a quote unquote caseload, like a more clinical model, will be available just for walk-in, and people can have that immediate support, because it is really important, you know, if somebody is having a difficult moment in time, that you catch them at that moment. And it goes back to Naomi's point about the walk-in, drop-in clinics. You know, when the need arises, as a system and a service, we need to be able to respond. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt there, Stephanie. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just simply add that the wait lists are managed as well. So when an individual does an intake for services, if the program that they're being referred to or connected with has a wait list, they are being assessed. So they're prioritized based on their needs. So that really depends on what they share and what's going on, and some things that go into determining where they're placed on a wait list, or what their priority is, or what other services are in place. So sometimes somebody may have other support services involved, which would mean that, okay, as we look for an opening to connect them with a counselor or a worker, whoever, we know that they're supported by this person. So should something come up, they're not completely on their own. If somebody had no services involved, that would certainly bump them up on our wait list. We also offer a number of different programming to people who are on our wait list. So here at Addiction Services, we can offer people access to our distress tolerance group while they wait for an individual counselor. We have information sessions on things like relapse prevention, just information about substances, stress management, things like that, so that people do have access to some resources while they wait. They're not just waiting. And then we follow up with them. So if our wait list gets really long and we know that people are going to be waiting maybe over a month for services, then we make sure that we are connecting with them once a month so that we can check in to make sure that, as you mentioned, things aren't deteriorating. We always ask people to, when we leave it at the intake stage, if things change, please call us back. But then we will check in with them as well.
Right. Okay, any other questions for Clark and his team?
Sandra had her, has a hand up there.
Go ahead, Sandra.
The presentations are very detailed today, and the program and fiscal restraints are certainly appreciated, as well as the gaps. Though I, as a representative of the Peer Advisory Committee, challenge every agency and each member of this task force to consider how partnerships with people with lived experience can be enhanced for the betterment of the recipient users and their families, not to rain on Felicia's success stories, but their present day success stories. As a member of the Peer Advisory Committee, I can tell you there will be relapses in those two success stories, and I truly hope that the services are available to them at that time so that the relapses aren't long felt for each of these individuals. These enhancements, they don't need to be cost inhibitive. The boots on the ground examples may include simply staff training about addressing stigma and the language used. Some of the language I've heard today during this meeting, the use of addict. Please use a person living with a substance use disorder as opposed to addressing them as an addict. Or simply reviewing some of your processes, which could be the initial contact by an individual or their wait time. When someone's reaching out, is it an actual live voice that they're hearing, or is it a voicemail? Because having access to a phone is something that is very real for individuals living with this type of experience. I won't go into any further detail. I'll leave my comments for each of you to ponder.
Clark, did you want to respond?
I would say, certainly agree. We highly value that our peer program and what peers bring, and that training in how to engage and use one's life experience with mental illness or addiction is really critical in providing hope, and hope is such a crucial element in recovery. And you know, I think it was important to provide the little orientation to harm reduction, because what we do face as well, I think, in wider society is a little resistance to a harm reduction approach. Because a harm reduction approach says, yes, we accept the fact that you will be using substances, and but we want to make sure you use them safely. And there are other components of a harm reduction approach that we could look at for the system, such as safe supply, which gets into a little more controversial area where we actually get physicians or practitioners who are able to dispense medical grade opioids to ensure that they get a safe supply, because there's a real danger in the use of street drugs in terms of what they can be laced with. So it is a challenge, I think, in our sector in terms of what people again, sort of going back to that initial meeting where we want to fix the problem. And it's not really, we are dealing with people, and you can't just sort of fix them. We have to accept and work with them.
Right. Okay, thanks, Clark. And Sandra, thanks for making those points. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move along.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, Councillor Keaveney, and then Alison Govier.
Okay, go ahead, Shirley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to comment and ask a question of Clark and his team. Recognizing that our county is experiencing and will continue to experience significant growth, and realizing that the challenge has increased during COVID, as we've heard during the presentations, and we're seeing more illicit drugs. And we know that, I think I can safely say, in all of our lower tiers that we are struggling to secure enough doctors. Our family physicians are very, very difficult to recruit. So I'm fearful that the need is going to increase. Are we fearful that things will get worse before they get better? Will the trend continue, and will people be waiting longer, and will it be even more difficult to secure the resources and the things that people need to get on a path to wellness?
I think the trends will continue. This has been a trend that's been building for the past decade, I would say. So yes, I would think it is something that may get worse. The pressures will intensify. I think one thing that rural areas have always been challenged with, as well as northern areas, is the models of care, finding models of care, because you don't necessarily have the concentration of population to provide an efficiency, a cost efficiency in delivery of service. So when you look at, when funders may step back and look at our per capita funding, they say, well, you're very well resourced on a per capita basis. But when you try to translate that into a service delivery model that can provide service across a very diffused population, it doesn't add up. So we also need to paint a data picture that really outlines our challenges in terms of distance. How many FTEs are chewed up in travel time, and what does that mean? And so we can have sort of a rural factor built into the algorithm for funding, because that is a challenge. And for our part, we need to continue to develop these more innovative models to provide service. We can't take an urban model and transplant it into Grey Bruce. It doesn't work. So I'm hopeful. I think we have very talented people and we have a very collaborative culture in Grey Bruce. So I think we can meet the challenge, but yes, I agree that the pressures will increase.
Okay, follow up, Councillor Keaveney, are you all right?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Alison Govier.
I had my hand up. I took it down in the interest of time. And I wonder if we can maybe just flag in the notes to return to the topic of engaging folks with lived experience, because this is something that I think merits more time than we're able to give it during this meeting. And I also just wanted to recognize it. It's not an easy, this is a challenge or an opportunity, I guess, that a lot of communities are trying to figure out. That, you know, we are taking steps in the right direction here in Grey Bruce, and having Sandra and myself part of this conversation is an example of that. But I think that we can kind of level up this conversation by providing some concrete steps that we can all take as organizations and as committees of council to do this well. So I just wanted to flag that for future discussion.
Yeah, great idea. Thanks, Alison. Okay, we'll move on to our next presentation. Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Ara, and Dr. Zayed is here for a presentation as well. So Dr. Ara, if I could turn it over to you, and you can turn it over to Dr. Zayed, and we'll do both, and then we'll have questions at the end, if that's okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Tara. If you can move to the next slide, that'll be great, please. Oh, the next one, please. Thank you. The services we provide, obviously, there are a lengthy list. I'm going to go through 3 programs of them high level, and then turn it to Dr. Zayed to talk about the rest of the presentation. And in between, I'll just mention what I do believe the bulk of the work this committee can do over the coming years, or plan for the coming years. So one of the programs is Healthy Baby, Healthy Children. It is instrumental in preventing and early identification of need related to mental health. And there is robust screening of the need during pregnancy. I agree with Phil, age 0 is where we start, and we can actually go before age 0, identifying families in need to support whether education or education about nutrition, or identifying risk factors is essential. We have a database, we have the connection with the partners, we have all the aspects of the program that are required. We also screen all live birth in Grey Bruce. And if we can go to the next slide, please. Thanks. If any family is positive on screening, we do a thorough assessment and we provide the tools that are needed. And we obviously, public health doesn't do any good work without connecting with the partners and the community, mobilizing the different systems. We connect with the school, we identify priority consultation for school. Sorry, if you can go to the next slide, this one should be number 6. Sorry for that. Any family that is positive will have in-depth assessment, and we connect with whether it's schools or collaboration with social work. We encourage we'll promote the 18-month well baby visit, and that's working with the healthcare system. And there are other tools that can be used. If we go to the next slide, please. Improve parent and child relationships, and that's another key component in healthy development of children. And all these things are very important before the age of 5. Again, our team is expert in it, and we connect with the families. We connect the families to the resources in the community and other aspects. If we go to the next one, please. Sorry, I'm going to trouble you if we can go back 4 slides to the school slide. That's another program, the school health. Thank you. At schools, there is a long list of things to be done, and the different age groups, and we have been doing this for years, improving, refining programs using the best evidence, even supporting the school boards to apply for certain grants and funding specific for certain need, and mental health is definitely one of them. Again, I can go through a long list, but for the purpose of this committee, governance and operation committee, I will just mention that there are plenty of programs there. And if we can go to the next slide, please. If we can go to the 2 more slides, or 3 to the this one, thanks. So the needle syringe program, the naloxone program, and the outreach program, the 3 slides, all of them are combined in a way to identify, to open the door for people who are least advantaged, whether it's related to housing or opiate use or substance use, or you name it, mental health. And those programs don't work in vacuum. Everything Clark mentioned is intertwined, and we can always increase the integration and the communication. But we do have 17 partner sites. We have the different partners that presented before us to connect with these disadvantaged individuals. If we can go to the next slide, please, and the next slide. So the community outreach, obviously the work that has been done over the past few months during the pandemic, the partnership, the roaming home in Hanover was an outbreak, but managing that outbreak required that high level of planning. The plan was put forward. Dr. Zaid had tremendous experience in northern Saskatchewan, and the plan implementation of it, whether the leadership of the paramedics on the ground or the other partners, that plan is what I believe we need going forward, not specifically the plan for that nurse roaming home. Rather, you hear about, if I can zoom out before I hand it to Dr. Zaid, and that I do believe this is a meat of what I'm trying to convey. What Sandra mentioned, asked about the trends, are they getting better? They're definitely not getting better. And we know that people are living longer, and we know that the pressures of the society increasing, and we know that the social determinant of health are key in preventing things from happening. If we are going to invest more and more and more, and I'm not saying we don't need to invest, there is a limit. And obviously it's going to end up in a situation where more people needing this service and there's less dollar, and this is going to lead to our organizations or services cannibalizing themselves. It's going to be exactly like Phil mentioned. Is it going to be the infrastructure or the staff? And prevention is key. Harm reduction is key. And I do see harm reduction as a form of prevention. How can we connect the services we have locally? We have the will, we have the expertise in the different domains. Everybody who presented are expert in what they do. And I do believe they can implement the best practice there. Without a plan, connecting all these services together to address the issues before they happen, we will be chasing our tail. We will be ending up in situations where we're defaulting. Naomi mentioned community solution. Definitely, this should not really end up in the hospital. Phil mentioned age 0, like I mentioned. Clark mentioned integration. I do believe if we're gonna put a plan for the coming 5 years or 10 years, that is what we need. If that is not possible or not practical, or it's gonna take a long time, and the request from every service is more funding, I believe implementing a mechanism for approving funding that requires the service to enhance education and prevention is going to get us a step closer to our goal, which is having planned for prevention all over. I'll turn it to Dr. Zaid, and I know she will present top-notch work that has been done and to be done. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Ara. It's really great to be with this task force. It's important really to hear each other and to know about the perspectives. But I can see that the perspective of public health is really very important, but yet it is not. It is sort of absent or not known maybe to different parts. I can start with the situation in Hanover, with the community outbreak in Hanover, in the forum, where we realized that we really don't have not enough capacity, but we don't have a coordinated approach. So that's why I'm glad there is this task force. There is no good orientation about public health leadership in these situations and how to invest in the upstreams and the importance of data and the analysis of data and interpretation of data, the importance of public health planning. And if we talk about the impact on population, we have to start with a public health approach, not with an individual approach. So this is where we really should go, and this is where we can get the best allocation of funding and best allocation of resources in general, and the best way of knowing where we are heading to. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about mental health in Grey Bruce. How do we compare in Ontario? So just how we are doing in general, or what is the data. Next. So as you see in self-rated mental health, and this is all data that are from a Canadian Community Health Survey, 70% of Grey Bruce residents rate their mental health as very good or excellent, but 7% rate their mental health as fair or poor. 50 to 64-year-olds are at risk of mental health issues, and 60% between 50 and 64 and 65 and older, they rate their health at risk in mental health. Next. So for suicidal ideation, 13% have suicidal ideation. This is the increased age is between 50 and 64. It's less common among older adults in Grey Bruce. Next. This is the people at risk, how many incidents per year for suicide and injuries, self-harm injuries. So these are the data that we are focusing on in terms of knowing the trends and where we are going. Next. And this is regarding the mood disorder. So 9% of Grey Bruce have mood disorder, such as bipolar or depression. So this is the kind of again, the data that we have. Next. 15% saw a mental health professional in the past year. And this is mainly across the ages. Next. 24% of Grey Bruce find their work extremely stressful. So quarter of the population. Next. And 20% of Grey Bruce find life quite a bit or extremely stressful. So increased stress. And this data, by the way, is just before COVID. So we can also imagine the impact of a stressful pandemic. Next. So I am like, this is just a snapshot of data, and this is one kind of data that we are dealing with. The other type of data is rapid risk factor surveillance data, which focus on high priority public health issues, and the mental health issue is one of the greatest priority. When I talk about, I didn't want really to, for the sake of time, also to talk more about the data, but this is what I wanted to say, that this is one of our main priority to see the population data and where it is going, where it is compared to Ontario and to the Canadian levels. The most important for us really in public health is a strategic planning. So I just put this slide to see that what we are really, if we put this plan in terms of mental health. So for people, mental health wellness is important. Individual skills are really important as harm reduction or as other treatment or outreach, like individual skills, meaning creating this self-efficacy and working with individual on increasing their self-efficacy and sense of worth and sense of control. So this is really very important one that we focus on or prioritize. The program for public health, as Dr. Era mentioned, the program that we focus on, and it mainly focus or had the focus of social determinants of health. So if we talk about the main social determinants of health are housing and childhood experiences and social isolation. These are really important ones to give these people the sense of self-efficacy individually and the skills, and in the same time help them over long term. So these are really a main focus in public health. So you can see the maternal child health, the child development, and that create these childhood experiences. For our products or projects, we adopted the evidence-based practice and supporting, again, it is important to support the data sharing collaboration. As we can see during the COVID time, we had this, we realized the importance of data. We realize the importance of, we don't know the denominator of many situations, like, for example, how many we have of those living in a rooming in situations. So this focus of data is our main strategic planning. And one of the debrief, if you remember, my debrief for the COVID outbreak, one of them was the recommendation to have this outreach community approach for people who are vulnerable. So that is one of the main projects. Advancing research and innovation in terms of impact of stress on, especially after COVID, specific COVID stress over the population. The fourth item, which is a partnership, focusing on applying approach that strengthen public health learning system, population health approach, foundational standards, effective public health practice, effective communication, equity lens, population health data, and program planning and evaluation. And with our partnership or leadership in the SOS program or outreach, it was very important. The focus of public health is to have the planning part. So it's not about how many food we deliver, how many persons we see. Of course, these are all very, very important, but the outcome metrics for the short term, from 1 to 3 years, the intermediate from 3 to 5 years, and the 5 to 15 years, the long-term outcomes, and focusing on the impact and the outcome more than input and output, because this is where we should really have our monitor and our planning. That's how with public health involvement with the SOS was building the logic model, which involve what are the components of that program, what are the activities, who is doing what is the indicators for input, for output, for outcome, and then we had the evaluation. So we started the evaluation of this project early on. So people usually, or sometimes of project, they evaluate the project at the end of the project. But putting evaluation from a public health lens and perspective at the beginning of the project is the most important part. And through this evaluation, we can really discover many gaps early on that can be really that can be addressed immediately from the beginning, not at the end, so that really we know exactly what funding we really need and what resources we need and for what. Next. The focal area of partnership that we focus on here is in our strategic plan, and this strategic plan is supposed to be for short, medium, and long term. As I said, more like 15 years. It's a comprehensive strategy to address falls in older adults across the lifespan, collaborative opioid response involving multiple community partners, community alcohol conversations, and comprehensive addressing culture in a rural environment, strengthening the relationship with Anabaptist communities, and also nurturing strong trusted relationship with indigenous communities. So priority population, special cultures, Grey Bruce Healthy Community Partnership, partnership with academic education, school boards and research institute, advisory committee on urgent and emergent public health issues. And this is a new formed committee taking also what the COVID outbreak and its recommendation to another level. And one of this community committee work is also the supervision of the SOS project, participation in action groups addressing income security, food security, safe, affordable houses. So these are the focal area of our strategy. But in the same time, there is now, this is something that from a mental health perspective, the COMO, or the Medical Officer of Health at COMO, a working group was recently formed, and this work group from multiple health units, I am a member also of this group. It really works on certain priority, formulating center priority for creating a public health task force, provincial task force for for the drug and opioid problematic drug use specifically, and especially including people with lived experience and drug use, to guide necessary robust integrated provincial approach, expand access to evidence-informed people who use drug-centered harm reduction programs, expand access to evidence-informed, trauma-informed substance use prevention, expand the access to evidence-informed patient-centered treatment for opioid use disorder, address the structural stigma and related harms that create barriers. So we identified these are priorities, and then we see where is public health's role in these priorities. So this is from a drug abuse or opioid crisis. So where is public health is priorities here? We think that priority of public health will be really or leadership needs in planning, in foundational standard approach, and in the equity lens, and in this population health approach. So that will be also at a level of at a provincial level, and working with the ministry, working with Public Health Ontario, and working also with our partners from mental health, from the treatment or service delivery partnerships, and community as well. Next. So this is my last slide, but just to summarize the gaps that we see from a public health perspective and advocacy needs from this task force. So the concept of service delivery versus population health approach. This is really something that needs to be identified and very well oriented to everyone working in this task force, so that we can really understand where the approach or the work that work best and have the best impact. Missed and underused data. For sure, we have problems with data. We need to have this collaboration. We work in public health now very diligently on updating this data in terms of population data. Like I gave this snapshot pre-COVID, but we are working now with having more data, really, especially related to youth and children from a Canadian Health Survey 2020, and also getting more data, detailed, customized data for Grey Bruce through the rapid risk factor surveillance system. So the first cycle, there are 4 cycles with 300 modules of data. The first cycle, which is 4 months of the year, will be focused mainly on the COVID impacts on mental health of people with different types of stresses. So these data will be available and translated through the GB disk. Program evaluation, as I mentioned, the importance of program evaluation. Public health is really strong in that. We have great team of program evaluators and understanding the gaps and the issues from the beginning. And I think we have done a great job with the SOS and understanding the gaps. There are gaps in this project, and I'm really scrutinizing, because we all want things to be really successful. So we will work with our partners on that. Outcome metrics, as I mentioned, is important. It's not only how many brochures we delivered and how many people we have seen. So we need to work on these outcome metrics, and as a task force, this is an important issue and important focus. Community engagement with a focal spectrum of levels of engagement with all the priorities that I mentioned in our strategic plan. And we will be happy to support the task force with this spectrum. Knowledge translation and innovation, and we are working diligently on that. And this is really an important part to have this package of information translated to different audience. the public, the patients, the people, the staff, the frontline staff, the policymaker, identifying the area where policy windows are important and focus on packaging the information into this to this audience, especially during election times and during policy windows that we say about it in public health. So that's the area I think that's important for the task force to focus on and advocate to. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zayed and Dr. Ara. Wow, that's so much to take in all of today, actually. Dr. Ara, I'm particularly interested in what you had said about the healthy babies, healthy children. Last meeting, when I spoke about a curriculum in schools and talking about, beginning in grade 7 sort of thing. And then I hear you talk about, we're talking 0 and up I just find that fascinating. But if we started, and then you're leaning towards, education, but if we started a curriculum in all of public school, are we actually treating this like life lessons that we all teach at home to our kids? I'm trying to think of, 30 years ago with my boys, the things I was teaching at home that you don't get at school. I don't know, manners, treating women with respect, developing a work ethic, caring about the person beside you, all those little things. Is that what we're talking about? We're going to start teaching this in our public schools, and then what is the progression then? What does it look like to you? Are we eventually getting up to mental health and addictions at some point, or what are you looking at there in terms of education? Did we lose Dr. Ara? Oh, maybe he's muted.
He has indicated that his microphone is not able to turn off.
Yeah, if his mic's not working, maybe what we could do is we have the question, Chair O'Leary, and maybe we could bring that back to the beginning of the next meeting, just to make a note in the agenda that
would be great, because that was a really long question. Okay, any other questions then for Dr. Zayed? She's still here. Buck, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on that one point you made about missed and underused data. I wonder if you could flush that point out just a little bit more for me.
So there are some population data that, for example, I will give an example on that. When we had the outbreak in Hanover, we didn't really have enough information about how many community members or population living in this similar situation. How many rooming in, like there are things that was discovered by chance and not by like what are the needs of these people. So I think this is some sort of data that we have. In terms of maternal child health as well, there are some data that are still required regarding drug addiction, and especially in women at the reproductive age group. There are also information related to what kind of drugs that are used in the community, and this kind of links between some indirect links to get some drugs from other areas, like in Waterloo or in some areas that they have some youth go to these areas to get some drugs. So we need some data, especially qualitative data as well, other than quantitative. The qualitative data are not available in as much as the quantitative data, and the qualitative data can be obtained through the field, through the study and the working with people.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I recognize that time is short, but I'm really interested in this point, and I'd love to hear from the other members on the screen at some point, whether it's data that's missing, or is it that the data exists, but the problem is in the collection and presentation of that data, or coordination of that data. I think the data piece is for me anyways, extremely important. But I don't think we have the time to properly dig into it here today. I know that our time is short, but maybe we could table that and bring it back as a question another meeting.
That's okay, Kim, then if we just kind of file that and move on.
Yeah, similar to what we've done with similar task forces, what we tended to do at the beginning of the next meeting was just if there were outstanding questions, we would ensure that those were brought to people's attention, and either we'd have the answers or we would talk about what was happening to follow up.
Okay. Any other comments or questions for Dr. Ara or Dr. Zayed?
Dr. Ara, there was a question for you from Brian. So
well, we're just, no, that's okay. Kim has taken the notes on that, and we'll, because of time restraints, I think we'll just talk about that at the next meeting, and that's okay. So we'll just, we'll move on to correspondence on number 8. That involves a motion that the correspondence from the Ministry of Health regarding expansion of addiction and mental health services be received for information. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Carlton and Councillor Burley. Kim, go ahead.
And just very briefly, this relates to the comments that Naomi Vodden made earlier about how we are seeing some provincial investment in further treatment resources in communities around the province. So that's good news to see that those investments are happening. And we should all cross our fingers and our toes and make sure that we see something like that coming here soon.
Great. Any questions on that? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Item number 9, other business. What does poverty look like in Ontario? And Kim, you're up again.
And just to say, this was provided as for your information. It's a segment from TVO's The Agenda program, which touches on something we did that Clark, I think, mentioned earlier in our meeting today about how outreach services in rural Ontario are really, really a challenge, and how poverty impacts that provision of service or the lack of access to service makes everything even more devastating. So it was really there to provide some additional insight and reference to the members of the committee if you had a chance to take a look at that at your own time. Thanks.
Thank you, Kim. Is there any other business? Seeing none, number 10, our next meeting is April 19th at 9:30 a.m. And I need a mover and a groover for adjournment. Councillor Burley and Councillor Compass. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. We're adjourned. Thanks to all the presenters. That was a lot of information today. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much.